What's up, everybody? It's Pikel with League of Items, and welcome to Worlds 2021. In this video, we're going to preview all the matches tomorrow. We're going to look at DraftKings, and we're going to look at Bet365. For those of you who are new to the channel, I'm doing a $1,000 challenge during Worlds where I have to basically bet on every single game. I have a $1,000 bankroll, and I'm betting at least $20 on every single match, which should last me the entire tournament. If it doesn't, then you'll have some fun in the comments making fun of me. Since this is a betting channel, there will be some information that we talk about in regards to League of Legends specifically, but then there's also going to be betting specific lines of thinking and justifications for the teams that I like. So we're always looking for value, and we're always looking to create an edge against the sportsbook and our opponents on DraftKings. So before we get into all of that, I'm gonna play us a little something that I think some of you will remember.
Pico money. We making Pico money. Payday, about to throw a rack on China. Need some DFS advice, where can I find some? League of Items got the sheet with all the lineups and all the stacks that you need to get to diamond. League of Items!
Getting gold, that's the goal. Keep on winning on a roll. Kill for dragons, got soul. Now you got nowhere to go. Teleport and top to bot. Dive your carry on the spot. That's an ace. Wreck your base. Wear my crown. We on top.
Well, for those of you who are confused and why that's a thing, that was the song that we played basically all of last year when we were making videos. Maybe the best song ever. It's been called the best song ever by several sources. I've been called the songbird of our generation. But yeah, so for everyone who's new to the channel who hasn't heard that song, I hope you enjoy it as much as everyone else enjoys it. Last year at Worlds, we had my biggest win of my DraftKings career. I won $20,000 on DraftKings last year during Worlds in one tournament because Team Liquid made a big upset. So that's really the last thought I want to leave us with before we start getting into the preview and thinking about these games, is that in order to win money, you will have to do some things that are very questionable. And I don't mean ethically or morally or anything like that. I just mean, make some picks that are less likely to happen, because if they do happen, you have the chance to make some big time money. So let's get into the matchups. On the first day of Worlds 2021, we have two different slates on DraftKings. The reason why this happens is because DraftKings wants to get as much money as possible out of people through the rake. And what the rake is, it's basically a service charge that they charge to all of the people playing the game, DraftKings, the game itself, and that's how they keep the lights on. Basically, that's how they pay for all their operations and all the advertisements that you see. So that's what they're doing there. So in our first matchup tomorrow, we have HLE against LNG. So we have the play-in team from China against the play-in team from Korea. So let's take a look at the betting line. So the betting line is LNG is favored minus 163 to plus 120. For those of you who don't understand sports betting, minus 163 means that you need to bet $163 in order to win $100. Plus 120 means that if you bet $100, you will win $120 if Hanwha Life should win. The other important thing that we're going to talk about a lot with these money lines and everything is the percent chance that things will happen. So being at minus 163, that means that the sportsbook thinks that LNG will win this match roughly 60% of the time. The only caveat with that is if the sportsbook expects LNG to be the favorites, the more popular side, and they expect to get more money on that side, then they will put their rake, or VIG, whatever you want to call it, the amount of money that the sportsbook is trying to generate on this matchup specifically, because sportsbooks want to level out the money to 50-50 on each, not necessarily every time, but a lot of the time they want it to be 50-50 with the money on each side, and then a 7% rake is incorporated into their plus 120 and minus 163. So if you took the implied probability of each of these things happening, it would be probably between 106 to 108%. Since it's the first game of Worlds, I think that they'll probably get a decent amount of money on this. Bet365 has an operation in New Jersey, which is where I live, and then they also have something in Europe. I think that's where they were from originally. So that's game one. So when we get into DraftKings, LNG is the most expensive team. LNG is the most expensive team. HLE is the least expensive team for this specific slate. So obviously, if you're playing LNG and you want to pair them with the other favorite, which is red, it's going to be more difficult to do so. So if you want to take the more live underdog, which in my opinion is probably Hanwha Life, take Hanwha Life, pair them with red Canids. You can do red Canids as your primary stack or secondary stack, HLE as your primary stack or secondary stack. So what does it mean to be a primary stack or a secondary stack? Well, if you're playing on DraftKings, so for a lot of you who are watching this, you're probably more familiar with League of Legends itself. So the 3 highest scoring positions in League of Legends, if you just had to guess what they are, I'm sure you'd ultimately arrive at the right conclusion, which are the 3 main positions, ADC, mid, and jungle. They just generally get more kills than top and support. So those are the 3 most expensive players on almost every single team, and that is, I think, true in almost every single DraftKings slate. So let's say you wanted to have Chovy as your captain. Your captain's going to score 1.5 times as many points. That means if we make them our primary stack, we want to take 4 players from Hanwha Life. So we can take Chovy, Morgan, Willer, and Deft. And that would leave us with 3 spots open in our lineup, which is we'd put in Grevthar, Jojo, and Red Canids, and that fits. So when you're making a lineup on DraftKings, you need to have players from at least 2 different games. You can do a game stack where, like, if you think HLE and LNG is going to be very high scoring, you could theoretically put 6 players from that first game and then the team slot from the second match. If you wanted to game stack, you're probably better off doing Infinity and Red Canids as a game stack. Because I could see LNG and HLE playing it close to the vest and playing a slow-paced game. So let's take a look at the matchups specifically, and we'll do some of this on DraftKings and some of this through Leaguepedia. So the important thing to remember is that, as I drink some coffee, the important thing to remember is that everyone who watches League of Legends sees different things and focuses on different things, has different opinions on what makes a team good or what makes a player good. I have been saying for over a year now that I think Morgan is a good player. I know that other people disagree with me, and someone in my Discord today said, "Hey, Pikel, I know that you like Morgan." Kelsey Moser, I think that's how you say her name, did a VOD review explaining why Morgan is actually not that good, and they give Morgan Camille because it compensates for their lack of skill. So personally, I do respect Kelsey's opinion. However, I don't think that it makes any sense to say that you would put a player like Morgan on a champion like Camille, who can hard carry a game, and Morgan has hard carried games before, if you don't think that they're a good player. So whether or not Kelsey thinks that Morgan is a good player, Hanwha Life thinks that Morgan is a good player. They are not picking Camille with the intention of having Morgan lose by 20 to 30 CS and then be a liability for their team. What they're saying is that Morgan with Camille, even at a 20 to 30 CS deficit, is still an asset to our team. So we want to do as much as possible to get Morgan into a good matchup, especially if that matchup involves us getting Camille, because Camille always has the opportunity to stomp a game, win a lane, dive the enemy backline, and create disruption during a team fight. Morgan is up against Ale. So Ale is an interesting player, and I think a lot of people would probably say that Ale is better than Morgan. The reason why I'm highly skeptical about that is because Ale was not a starter last year in the LPL. And obviously, things change as time goes on. Maybe Ale grew a lot as a player, or maybe, the team that they were on just didn't accurately evaluate them, and they thought that Makuya, I think, was the other top laner. So it's possible that Ale is better than Morgan, but based off of what I've seen, I don't have any reason to grade Ale much higher than Morgan, which immediately differentiates me from the rest of most. It differentiates me from most people watching this, watching League of Legends. So I'm fine saying that Morgan is better, at least better relative to what everyone else thinks. So I think that I have an edge. If Hanwha Life wins and Morgan has a good game, me personally, I am more likely to have Morgan than the field. So that's just one way to look at it. Tarzan against Willer. Tarzan is a better player than Willer. Tarzan's one of the best junglers in this tournament. One thing to mention about Willer is that Willer has played a lot of Viego, and apparently Viego is much weaker than they used to be. So that'll be a very important thing to watch out for in this match, and Hanwha Life in the play-in stage, is which junglers do they prioritize, and is Viego still playable? Because if Viego is still playable, then it gives Willer some playmaking upside. Viego, even though he's weaker, still has the fight winning upside just by getting a reset. So it'll be interesting to see how much their opinion on Viego has changed. But like I said, Tarzan is the better player. I think Tarzan has a legitimate advantage in the jungle. In the mid lane, Icon against Chovy. Right now is probably the highest opinion anyone has ever or that we have had collectively on Icon. Icon was always a pretty good player, mostly a control mage player, at least from what I saw the past year and a half, 2 years, and very good at Orianna. That's not good enough against Chovy. So this split, we have seen Icon branch off and play a lot more styles of champions, and that's very good. That's very good for them long term, in regards to in other matchups. But I have a tough time believing that Icon is going to completely dominate Chovy in this game, unless Hanwha Life does some crazy thing in the draft, which they've been known to do. Maybe they throw Chovy on something, the equivalent of a set mid or a Seraphine mid, or just some kind of low agency, low priority mid laner. That would be a very bad thing for people who end up betting on Hanwha Life tomorrow. And then in the bot lane, we have Light and Elwandi against Deft and Vista. So going into this year, obviously people had a higher opinion of Deft than Light. Light has looked better than Deft this year. The Chinese region in general is thought of as being stronger than Korea. And Hanwha Life hasn't looked great for most of the year, so people are lower on Hanwha Life for that reason as well. In regards to this matchup, I bet Hanwha Life at plus 150. So I think that this is probably really close to a 50-50 matchup. So I'm getting additional value putting my money on HLE. If I genuinely think that this game is a coin flip, and I'm getting a 60% chance, if I think it's a coin flip, and the sportsbook is saying it's 60-40, that means I have a 10% edge over the sportsbook. So there's those 10% difference in outcomes where I'm getting additional value for my money. And that's what I'm trying to look for. So I think that this matchup is much closer than the sportsbook does. I think that in a best of one, anything is possible, which is another reason to think that Hanwha Life can be stronger. Hanwha Life has looked good in scrims, according to multiple sources. Someone was saying today that PSG leaked scrim results, and Hanwha Life performed better than LNG did during scrims, which is not the reason why I made this pick. I made this pick a week ago, when the lines were originally posted. So it's not like I'm changing my opinion with new information. I think from a game theory perspective, it was already a very good selection, and now it's just a better selection because there's information coming out backing up what we thought originally. So that's the first match. I've got Hanwha Life, and then in the second match, I have Red Canids over Infinity Esports. This one is tough because I'm not extremely familiar with either team. I don't watch much CB LOL. At least I didn't watch a lot of CB LOL this year. I watched more CB LOL last year. Guigo against Bugax. We've seen Bugax before. I don't really remember having like a extremely high opinion of them. Aegis against Solid Snake, I don't know any better. Grevthar against Cody, I don't know any better. Titan against White Lotus, Jojo against Ackerman. White Lotus and Ackerman, I know Ackerman's a very good Thresh player. We've heard that before at Worlds or at some international tournament, so I am somewhat prepared for that, like a playmaking support. And then the other narrative kind of surrounding this matchup is Grevthar being like a big upgrade over their previous mid laner and has completely turned around their organization's communication issues. So the line is -188 to +137. I think that Brazil in general is a stronger region than Latin America, so that's one reason to pick Red Canids. They have tougher competition. The second reason is because Red Canids has not, I think somebody was saying that they haven't lost since they lost two games during playoffs or 2 matches during playoffs. It's unclear what the person said in Discord. But with that being said, I think that if I'm playing DraftKings tomorrow in this 2-game slate, I'm probably going Hanwha Life plus Red Canids, and I'll just rotate through it a bunch of different options. There aren't any tournaments that I'm like falling over myself to get into. But, you know, as time goes on and I start thinking more and more about Worlds and I want to get action in on the early games at 7 o'clock, I'll probably have something on these matches in one of those games. I already have those bets in. So I have, let me just go through those 2 bets again. I have Red at -150 and Hanwha Life at +150. So another thing I guess to talk about for those of you who aren't familiar with sports betting is that I basically got my money in at the right time. So by betting these matches about a week and a half ago, I have +150 instead of +120, which is better for me. That means that if I bet 100, I bet 20, but if I bet $100, I would make $30 extra. So divided by 5, I'll make $6 extra than if I waited. And then with Red Canids, pretty similar. It's -188 to -150. So I got the best of the line in both spots, and that's really what we're trying to do when we're making bets on a sportsbook. So that's it for the first 2 games. We have 4 more matches. And since this is the main slate, we're going to talk a little bit more about DraftKings. We're going to talk a little bit more about DraftKings and like what it means to get unique. Because ultimately, we want to give ourselves the chance at coming in solo first place to win $20,000 again. That'd be very nice. So in the first match, we have LNG against Peace. So Peace is from Oceania, the Oceanic region. And LNG is from China. So I will be picking LNG in this situation. For those of you who want to have a low percent outcome, have exposure to a low percentage outcome, go ahead. Make a $10 Peace lineup. Instead of betting $10 or $20 on the sportsbook, put like 2 different lineups into DraftKings, and you'll give yourself that first place upside. The line is +800, so if you bet $100 on Peace, you would get back $800. In order to make $100 on LNG, you have to bet $2,500. So that doesn't feel great. We can go lane by lane, so it's going to be Ale against Vizicachi. Vizicachi is pretty washed up at this point in terms of being a competitive international top laner. I used to love Vizicachi. I think that he had a very interesting approach to League of Legends, was very good on Unicorns of Love when they were making their run. And I think he's also really good at chess, and I do enjoy playing some chess. I think he was also a swimmer as well. Maybe I'm getting all that wrong, but he's like Romanian or something. Cool guy. Not as good as Ale. Tarzan against Babip. Well, Tarzan is the king of the jungle, and Babip is a baseball statistic, so I'm going to go with Tarzan, who is one of the best players in the tournament at their position. Icon against Tally. Icon is better than Tally. Babip and Tally have been at international tournaments in the past with one another. So that's nice, but it's not going to. I don't think it's going to help much against China. And like I said, I'm not saying that there's a 0% chance that Peace is going to win, but I'm not betting my money on that outcome happening. If it happens, somebody's going to win a lot of money. Good for you. The problem is that even if Peace wins, unless they are the first or second highest scoring team, it's not going to matter. So, you know, I'm willing to lose in that scenario. And then we have Light and Alwandi against Violet and Alaric. That's an interesting name. So LNG is where you want to go. So before we move on to the next match, the important thing to take a look at here is the pricing for everybody on LNG and also the implications of their cost on their stackability. So for DraftKings, we want to stack together at least 3 players in our primary stack. Generally, 4 is better. And the reason this happens is because there is a high correlation between DraftKings scoring and the number of kills a team has. So if LNG has the most kills out of these 4 matches, they will most likely have the highest fantasy point totals as well. So in a scenario where LNG has the most kills tomorrow, which players do we want exposure to? Obviously, like we said before, jungle, mid, and AD carry are the 3 best positions generally. Like there are games, of course, where the AD carry is kind of on an island for some reason, or the mid laner is on an island for some reason. But generally, jungle gets very good kill participation. So let's say, grab Tarzan because he's one of the best players in his role at Worlds. Take Icon, take Light. Then we can try to figure out, do we want to get our 4th player in from LNG in the top lane or in the bot lane? It looks like top does a little bit better in terms of average fantasy scoring, but since you're paying less for the support, you can pretty easily just click Iwandi, I think, there. Now, the reason this is important is because when you start picking which team you want to primary stack with, it changes which options you have for your secondary stack. So let's say you wanted to have as many LNG and HLE players in your lineup as possible because you think they're the 2 most likely teams to win. And since they're the most likely to win, they're also more likely to have high kill numbers. So let's just try to put Hanwha Life in there and let's see what happens. So if we put in Morgan and Willer, then we're left with 3,500. If we're left with 3,500, we cannot complete this lineup. So this is an invalid lineup. After looking through all of this earlier, I think that you might be able to get some kind of weird combination if you do support captain or team captain or something like that. But generally in large field tournaments, those aren't going to win. So I don't really look for them. I'm really looking for AD carry captain, mid captain, jungle captain. So that's that. So basically what my research showed before, and I'm not saying that I'm 100% positive, but I'm pretty sure that in order to get LNG into your lineup, you need to play them in order to get one of the good captain positions from LNG into your lineup. You need to start with like Detonation Focus Me as your secondary stack, which isn't necessarily a problem for me because I like Detonation Focus Me. I think they have a good chance to win tomorrow. But that makes them more. That's going to inflate their ownership a little bit. So that's basically it for LNG. If I had to pick one captain from LNG, I would probably go with Tarzan because I think it's very possible that Tarzan just completely dominates the early game. And worst case scenario is that, Icon or Light go insane and you probably wouldn't be able to come in first place at that point. But as long as LNG scores a lot, then you should be able to cash. The issue with that is that only 20% of lineups get money back at minimum. Only 20% of lineups get cash, period. Roughly, plus or minus a percent, depending on the contest. So if LNG is one of the highest scoring teams, and you're going to have a lot of competition because there will probably be 25 to 30% of people making lineups with LNG. That number might even be higher because of how likely they are to win. So that's enough. That's enough for the first match. Second match in Hanwha Life against Infinity. So one thing that you might want to take a look at is if LNG, Hanwha Life, or Infinity have a very good or very bad first game, you could theoretically make a lineup right around lock as long as you have some additional spots reserved. But I don't think it's likely to. Obviously, it's not likely that Infinity beats Hanwha Life. So again, I'm just taking Hanwha Life here. I put a bet on Hanwha Life. I put a $20 bet in on them. I forget what the number was. Hanwha Life against Infinity. Minus 800. So that's really not that bad. I mean, the other one was minus 2,500. So the sportsbook is basically saying Infinity has a better chance of beating Hanwha Life than Peace does of beating LNG. Morgan against Bugax. Again, I'm taking Morgan. Wheeler against Solid Snake. Chovy Cody. Deft, White Lotus, Vista, Ackerman. I mean, I cannot, in good conscience, suggest playing Infinity over Hanwha Life. And again, if you have your reasons for why you think it's a spot where Infinity can upset, go ahead, make your bet. Put your money where your mouth is. Either bet money on DraftKings or bet money on the sportsbook. But don't sit there in the comments when Infinity wins and say, oh, Pikel, you should have known better. Infinity, they have an underrated team. They're from Latin America. Nobody gave them any respect, but they're actually really good. If you actually think that and you're actually going to say that to me in the comments, then at least show me a picture of you winning money, because it's a pretty audacious statement from future you. So you better watch yourself. I'm just kidding. I'm not kidding at all. I'll find you. Detonation Focus Me against Unicorns of Love. So the Unicorns of Love, who, just from a branding perspective, probably one of the best organizations in the world in terms of team name. But they're up against Detonation Focus Me, who also has a pretty cool name. The Unicorns of Love, they have that really weird mascot, the guy that walks around without a shirt, has a six-pack. Good for you, man. You got a six-pack. Put a shirt on. We're in an indoor, air-conditioned facility. We really don't need you running around without your shirt on. COVID is out there. Sorry if you don't believe in COVID, but, you know, we're just going to operate as if it is reality. So Detonation Focus Me against Unicorns of Love. Detonation Focus Me minus 163 to Unicorns of Love plus 120. For those of you who are not familiar with sportsbooks, you might say to yourself, Pikel, that sounds really familiar. Didn't we have odds like that before? The answer is yes. LNG against Hanwha Life, minus 163 to plus 120. So the reason why sportsbooks do that, again, just to kind of reinforce the stuff that we've talked about already, sportsbooks are looking to get 50% of the money on each side. They want to take a rake between 6 to 8%. Sometimes they'll be overweight on one side or the other, and they actively root for a side to win. So if, let's say, somebody bet $10,000 on Unicorns of Love to win, and the sportsbook only took back $1,000 on Detonation Focus Me, well, guess what? The sportsbook would want Detonation Focus Me to win at that point, because they don't want that $10,000 liability, because it would be like $11,000, $12,000 that they would potentially lose. And sportsbooks are not in the business of losing money long term. So let's take a look at this matchup head to head. I know who I'm picking in this spot. So Eevee against Boss. I think that this is a spot that Boss might be better than Eevee. The reason I think that is because during my research, looking through some of these scoreboards, there are a decent chunk of games where Eevee is like lower in regards to kill participation, is lower in regards to draft priority, is lower in regards to it has like worse KDAs. Like they don't necessarily, they're one of the more fragile portions of the team in terms of their kill participation in wins. So if I was going to dodge somebody in this situation, I'd probably not have Eevee in my lineup if I was using them as a secondary stack. So I think that if Unicorns of Love is able to win, I think that Boss will probably have a lot to do with it. I think that Boss had some good performances last year as well. In the jungle, we have Steel against Ahaha Sick. Again, we've gone through this in the past. I'm pretty sure I'm supposed to say Anana Sick, but it's an H, and in America, we pronounce that as huh. So Ahaha, or huh, ha. So that's an H. I'm going to say Ahaha Sick because I think it's a lot more cool of a name as Ahaha Sick. Like Ahaha Sick Bro, Sick. And that's just the reality that I want to live in. In regards to the implications for DraftKings and the real life betting, I think that Steel is a better player than Ahaha Sick. Last year, I don't think that we got a lot of great performances out of Ahaha Sick. If I recall correctly from my research, I'm not going to pull it up on the screen or anything. I think that they are more of a gank-heavy jungler, and Steel is more of a true carry and is able to win through farming as well. So that's really a matchup that I think Detonation Focus Me will be likely to exploit. So I definitely like the Detonation Focus Me side of things here. In the mid lane, we have Arya against Nomanz. So Arya is a player that has been talked up over multiple international tournaments. I was pretty upset with how they used Arya at their last international tournament. All of the narratives surrounding this player was like they're an up-and-coming superstar. Their team had to reorganize their roster in order to fit them into their lineup so that they can get international experience, which is why Udapon is their AD carry. So if I have any of that wrong, please explain to me in my comments why I'm wrong. But with Arya, I think that we have an extremely high upside player, and I hope that Detonation Focus Me is willing to give Arya the tools necessary to snowball an early game advantage, give them agency, give them engage potential, give them priority, allow them to team up with Steel and exert additional pressure on the mid-jungle duo, because that's really where the biggest difference is in this matchup. However, if you're Unicorns of Love, there's two ways to deal with this. If you think that you have an advantage in the top lane, then send Ahaha Sick and Nomanz top lane to get some dive action going on. Try to incorporate boss into more of your early and mid game plays. Get Ahaha Sick onto a gank heavy jungler so that you can try to force some action in the top lane or in the mid lane. Or you can try to outscale through the mid lane, because I do think that Arya will be on a champion that they're going to try to play through and have carry the game. So if you're Nomanz, we have seen Nomanz play things like Kassadin in the past, where they are a super scaling threat, and if you don't punish them hard enough in the early game, they could be a problem in the late game. But overall, like I said before, I prefer Arya. I like the upside of a player like Arya because of what we've been told. Generally, teams are wrong about a lot of stuff, but when they're telling you, hey, this guy is the real deal, this is the player that we're building around, they have no reason to lie about that. Why would they tell us that if it's not true? And obviously, why would they tell us that if it is true? Because they're kind of giving their hand in terms of, who they're going to play around. But then the draft happens and it's the truth anyways. So it really does look like Arya is the focal point of their team, partially because of their bot lane. So Udapon and Gange against Argonaut and Santas. Udapon, I think, is not a very good player. I don't think it's going to matter in this situation, and I don't really think it's going to matter as much in this in their matchups with other teams where Detonation Focus Me can get away with playing a utility AD carry or a very strong laning AD carry. The one spot where I think this will be an issue is against teams of similar skill levels or higher skill levels that are also able to play hyper carries in the bot lane. Because if they're able to play hyper carries in the bot lane, that puts additional pressure on Steel and Arya to create advantages in the early and mid game and make the game get out of control before the scaling can come into effect. So it'll be interesting to see how they line up like their perceived strength, their own perceived strength in their groups, and line it up with their play styles. I think that a lot of teams fail to do that. And I'm not saying it's the only way to approach League of Legends, but whenever I have coached a team and I think that we're the favorite, I am a little bit more likely to draft a little bit more in the early game while still having some late game insurance, but I would like to win in the early game and utilize our better drafting, utilize our better communication, utilize our better understanding of the early game, start snowballing dragons, get a Rift Herald, try to create a lot of pressure and give the other team an opportunity to make a mistake. When you start playing these slower games, there are less interactions between teams, less opportunities to make mistakes. They can stick around for longer. If they draft a later scaling team than you, then you run the risk of losing the game. You're more likely to lose the game at that point. So there's that. I think that Detonation Focus Me is the right side here. It's more difficult to pair Detonation Focus Me with Hanwha Life and LNG, which makes me think that Detonation Focus Me will have a lower percent ownership than Unicorns of Love. Unicorns of Love is a team that people have some good memories from of last year. And then even some other people that I respect very highly, they made the point earlier today that if Detonation Focus Me is better than Unicorns of Love, it'll be the first time that Detonation Focus Me or a Japanese team is better than the Russian representative at Worlds. And that's a very smart take. So if it's true, I don't know if that's necessarily true. Like, the results may bear that out, but in terms of like raw strength from like a theoretical perspective, who knows if that's the truth. But it is a potential way to get yourself onto the Unicorns of Love side. That plus the DraftKings angle, plus the plus money that you would get on the sports book. Maybe people are just thinking to themselves, I want exposure to Unicorns of Love because of the type of lineups that it gets me on DraftKings. So all of those reasons are reasons. They're reasons. So whatever helps you get there. And this time tomorrow, some of us will be right, some of us will be wrong. But isn't that how it always goes? So what's next? Let me just check. Yeah. So that's basically that. And then the last game is Beyond against Galatasaray. It might be Galatasaray. I've heard some people saying it like that, which, I don't know any better. So I'm going to say Galatasaray. Going into this tournament, I talked a lot about what happened last year at Worlds and the narratives that people will likely bring up and remember from last year. So last year we had Supermassive put together a good performance. They had Armut, they had Cacao. Am I remembering that correctly? Turkey had a good representative, and they did well. They beat Mad Lions. They looked good. That's nice. Okay. This is a different team, different organization, different year, different meta, different everything. You can take all of those good feelings and throw them out the window. If you want to make the argument that they are a stronger region than they're given credit for, fine. But let's not pretend like that is a good enough reason to pick Galatasaray. One of those. I feel like that's like the thing, that's the straw man fallacy that people are propping up Galatasaray with. Because when I look at their roster, I'm not really impressed. Unfortunately, they're up against another team that I think has a lot of the same narratives propping them up. So let's take a look at this real quick. Liang. Okay. So we have Liang. Do I think that Liang is a great player? No. Do I think that Husha is a great player? I don't know. Maybe. And there's been a lot of talk about Husha recently. So that's kind of one of the question marks where maybe if Beyond Gaming is doing really well in this tournament, it has a lot to do with Husha. Maybe. Husky and Maoan. I'm not sure who the starter is. I'm guessing it's Husky. It's not. It's Maoan. So we have Maoan born in 2002 and Husha born in 2001. So that's their young mid-jungle duo. That is pretty important. Doggo, very young as well, had some good international performances. But again, a lot of the positive information surrounding this team right now is based off of their success from last year. Playing against teams in their region like PSG Talent, it doesn't really give me a ton of confidence that they're going to be competitive against top regions, but it does make it a little bit more interesting when they're playing against a team like Turkey. And right now, I feel like I'm kind of talking myself into flipping my pick, which is a little concerning. I didn't realize how young their mid jungle and bot lane are. The Doggo narrative. The reason why it's difficult for me is because the Doggo narrative that has been purely driven by previous tournament performances and not by what they've done recently. It might allow people to get on to Beyond Gaming when they shouldn't be on Beyond Gaming to the level that they're on Beyond Gaming. If we take a look at the sportsbook, minus 188 to plus 137. We saw that before. Minus 188 to minus 188 to plus 137. So they're saying it's the same kind of matchup where you have a team from a better region against a team from a lesser region. So maybe I was letting the Turkey narrative stuff and the PCS narrative stuff go a little too far. I would potentially have to relook at that. So Liang against Crazy. Crazy was in the LPL and LCK at different points, I think. I definitely remember watching this player. I'm not very impressed by Crazy in general. Mojito, I don't know much about them. I don't think that they're like the best jungler in this group, and it does scare me a little bit having Mojito up against Husha. Bolulu, a lot of people are really high on Bolulu right now. They think that they're a good player, so we'll have to see if that pans out. Alive, we have a Korean AD carry, so that's always something to kind of watch out for. Korean players are just very good in general. I know that everyone loves China, but a majority of the players at Worlds this year are Korean. I don't think that is an accident. If we take a look at some of their picks, so if Viego got nerfed hard enough, then this is going to hurt them a little bit. Trundle, Gwen. So the Gwen is very interesting. The Rumble is pretty interesting. Graves is interesting. Hecarim. It'll be cool to see how this kind of plays out with which champions are very popular. And that's kind of the problem with the first day. Like after the first day or two, we'll have a much better understanding of which champions are going to be highly prioritized, and then that'll allow us to kind of switch up our perception of teams a little bit. Okay. So that's that. Husha against Mojito. Again, if the only thing that you basically need to do to convince yourself to play Galatasaray is say, I want LNG or Hanwha Life or Detonation Focus Me to fit into a lineup with an underdog that's going to be low owned. And I think that's what Galatasaray represents. I'm kind of talking myself off the Galatasaray play right now. But I do have Galatasaray already, and this is what I posted in my Discord, which you can get access to for $10 a month through Patreon. Galatasaray over Beyond Gaming. This one is tough for me because I don't really want either team, and I'm not 100% sure how the field will roster them. I have to assume that Galatasaray is lower owned because there is more hype around Beyond Gaming. So that's kind of my basic way of getting to that position, but I could be convinced otherwise. And this is the kind of thing where I don't need to keep my opinion the same the entire tournament. I can make a switch if I see new evidence that makes me think different. And the fact that they're so young in jungle, mid, and AD carry, for me, it's generally a good thing because it means that we have seen less of them, and as time goes on and the more exposure we get to them, it'll become much more obvious how strong they are if there is some kind of big differential in terms of talent. The other problem is that this is the play-in stage, and this is where we're going to see probably the biggest discrepancy between team talent. But with that being said, the beauty of DraftKings is that you can get exposure to Galatasaray and Beyond Gaming and have some lineups that are alive going into the last match. So that's another thing that I'll probably end up doing. But that's basically it for day one of Worlds. If you like this betting content, please like, comment, and subscribe. Check out my Patreon. Check out Discord. Feel free to DM me on Twitter or whatever. Make some comments on YouTube, and I generally respond to like every single one. So that's it. That's hopefully a good day one at Worlds. I'm sure that I'll go 6 for 6 tomorrow. And I'm sure you all believe in me very much. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.